With us to review them this morning are the broadcaster and journalist Thomas Copeland and the entrepreneur Kate Hardcastle. So welcome back to both of you. And Kate, we're kicking off with you this time around, and a story in the Sunday Telegraph about John Lewis. So talk us through it.
Well, the story focuses on the fact that because it suggests of people working from home, or therefore head office workers who might not have those in-store roles, preferring to have a hybrid existence between the office and working from home, that the store is the business is looking to reduce down that very famous London HQ. But there's more to this than meets the eye. John Lewis has become probably one of the challenge brands in retail now that really the media particularly are looking to as we commentators on what's happening there, and is it relevant, is it retrospective of what's going on with the way that consumers buy. It's a brand that was much loved, still is really, but has certainly come out of favour with a lot of buyers. It's had a lot of challenges of late, starting the year with 2% down and saying that it wouldn't be paying the usual bonus, which a lot of staff there depend on. So a brand going through much evolution. We've heard talk from the chair, Dame Sharon White, about how she sees this moving to a brand that's representative and has more leaning into finance offers, banking offers, even home rentals. But the main retail organisation certainly needs to get better and heal and become progressive and relevant to a consumer that we see today, with, of course, a huge amount of competition in the marketplace. So it's interesting that, yes, we will start to see a lot of those big HQs in London start to move and evolve, just as we've seen the footholding of retail organisations become smaller on high streets, because it's about the quality of offer, not just the quantity.
Yeah, it's so interesting how retail is going to have to adapt to cost of living crisis and high rents on the high street and people working from home. There's so many challenges, aren't there? Really interesting to see what direction that takes us in. Let's move on to The Observer, shall we, Thomas? Because there's an article about Andrew Tate and how much schools discuss him in The Observer. So what are they saying there?
The government's decided to weigh on this a little bit. The Department for Education advising some schools that they shouldn't be talking about Andrew Tate. For people who don't know, Andrew Tate's an influencer, I suppose, is pretty unique in the scale of the influence that he's managed to amass over a relatively short period of time. He's sort of labelled the king of toxic masculinity, talks a lot about and has had some real influence over young people, especially young boys. In this article, it pretty much catalogues case after case of horrendous example of young boys behaving really inappropriately towards young girls in their schools, often pretty categorically quoting or inspired by Andrew Tate. Many instances in here not repeatable on air, and cases and reports to charities and to the government of misogyny and sexual harassment in schools going up. So the Department of Education at the moment is saying, we advise that schools do not talk about Andrew Tate. Their concern is that he will become promoted as a consequence of talking about him more. Not entirely sure. I mean, I think there's room for disagreement there. There's probably the case that if you don't address this stuff in schools head on, it will fester. It needs to be addressed properly. And actually, if you don't have teachers who are prepared to have these difficult conversations, then Andrew Tate's, he will not be the last of this kind of influencer. He's unique. I'm afraid to say, there are young men my age that I have seen certainly be influenced by the videos that he puts out, posting them or saying stuff like, oh, well, he's got a point here, and buying into some of it when you know that they buy into all of it. And that's concerning. And I'm 24 years old, and think about what kind of influence you're going to have on young boys who are 9, 10, 11, 12, in their early teens. You're at a very impressionable time in your life anyway. So I think it's probably the case that the department is going to need to come up with something more robust than just don't talk about it, push it away, because it's not going to go away, and there will be more Andrew Tates in the future.
Yeah, and interesting in this article, they talk about pupils saying, my dad likes him, though, and the dads coming in and defending their children over it. So a challenge for teachers there as well. Let's move on, Kate, to an article in the Sunday Express about social housing. What are they talking about here?
They're talking about the lack of it. And really, when we look at all those front pages today talking about the nuances of the coronation, we think about the real state of the nation. This is one of the most challenging sets of figures you'll read today. The fact that 9 out of 10 councils, local authorities fail to build properties that are required, that are needed for social housing. We know that when the Conservatives came in. There was a huge pledge to change this of all this in 2019, and that's been certainly watered down over recent years. But we just have this ridiculous situation. We've got people that can't get on the property ladder. I think there needs to be huge reform when it comes to things like mortgages, people paying so much in rent they can't even begin to save deposits for housing. And then we've got people who are desperately trying to get into social housing, and we're not building any. So when Keir Starmer starts to talk about this is an area where we need reform, this is an area we need change, you can't help to think that that might be certainly pricking the ears of so many that will be looking to him to perhaps be our next leader for bringing the Labour Party in, if they're going to deliver on this. What I really worry about is every time we read these figures, behind them are millions of people in absolute misery who are in housing that's just not adequate or suitable, who cannot find a way forward or out of the situation they're in. And many, many of them actually earning enough to be able to buy a reasonable property, but not being able to get there because the system financially will not permit them to do so, because the deposits required and the repayment required and the way they've got to meet the financial benchmark that's required. It's just an awful, abhorrent state of affairs.
Kate, would you pin the reason why it's not happening down to one thing? I mean, to what extent is it the case that people generally might say, yeah, we need more housing, but they don't actually want it built in their area? Is that one of the problems, one of the ways that there's resistance, do you think, Kate?
It doesn't seem that it's just one thing at all. It's to do with multiple housing ownership. It's to do with the costs. It's to do with, as you say, the land and sign off of the local councils, and not to bully the local councils as well, who've been through 3 years of just trying to do all they can to keep local place going, schools, etc., with dealing with everything from COVID onwards. So no, I think it is, as we say, that perfect storm of issues, but we need governments in place that are actually going to focus on this. You can't do much in life if you don't have solid foundations of at least a home to be able to set off from and try and build the life you want to build.
OK, yes, and lots of challenges, people renting as well and finding properties and prices going up. Lots of challenges around housing, aren't there? Let's move on to the Sunday Telegraph, Thomas. Their main story today is Kemi Badenoch getting some support, it says here, in her war on wokery. Who's she getting it from?
Well, interestingly, the Sunday Telegraph have sort of the coronation is on the front page, but they're running with this from Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, likely presidential hopeful. They've managed to bag an exclusive interview with him. It's 2 pages long, well worth a read. Couple of things jump out. One of them, he came to the UK as part of a multi-state visit, sort of trying to advertise Floridian exports and business around the world. He was in Japan and the UK at the end of his trip and elsewhere. He talked to James Cleverly, Foreign Secretary, and then the Trade and Business Secretary. And that was when this kind of line that they're running with at the start is, the war on wokery. I'm commending the Trade Secretary on that basis. Ron DeSantis has made a bit of a name for himself on this kind of war on woke thing. He's been relatively controversial in the States over stuff like banning or limiting what schools can teach pupils about issues of gender. He's taken on Disney and Disneyland down in Florida over similar issues. Not dissimilar to that, Kemi Badenoch in the UK has had a bit of a fight against the likes of gender-neutral toilets, the likes of decolonising the curriculum. So it was always going to be an area of agreement. There are a couple of really, lines that maybe surprise you. The Trade and Business Secretary apparently told the Florida governor that actually some of this was basically America's fault and that this cancel culture had emerged and had been an import from the United States, and he said that he was inclined to agree with that. So it was an interesting debate, probably on both sides of that, and an interesting conversation to be having between the two of them. The other thing that Ron DeSantis is going to be. Could be a really significant international figure. He didn't meet with Rishi Sunak for pretty obvious reasons. If he decides to enter the presidential race, he's going to have a horrifically bitter battle against Donald Trump, who certainly has the majority, the weight of support within his party at the moment, and he would probably be the expected candidate. But Ron DeSantis, could be huge, or we might forget him about him.
Indeed. It'll be interesting to see where that one goes. Anyway, we are out of time, both of you. Lovely to see you both this morning. And a reminder, there's loads about the coronation on the front pages as well, which we dealt with in the last app. But lovely to see you both, Kate and Thomas. Thanks very much indeed.